Caribbean Calypso.
Limón might be considered the most exotic province of Costa Rica. Many tourists visit the Caribbean each year and they are delighted to be part of the atmosphere it emanates. However, its history comes along with slavery, resistance, and immigration. Let's remember that Costa Rica was colonized by Spain in 1512, yet Limón was officially taken over 2 centuries later. This means the tribes from the Caribbean resisted many attacks until their last leader, Pablo Perez, was executed in front of everybody, allowing the colonizers into their lands. But Pablo Perez remains a hero till this day. As a consequence of the colonization, many black slaves were brought, as well as the United Fruit Company that centuries later would encourage people from all the Caribbean Sea, like Jamaica and the Bahamas, to come and work for them in Limón. These other countries also suffered from colonizations as well. This is the reason why in Haiti they speak French, or in Jamaica they speak English, because they would speak the language of their colonizers. This would have a strong impact on the culture, the traditions, and even the language of the Limón we know today. The dancing, the food, the traditions are all part of Limón's identity. This multiculturalism allowed pidgins to rise. This way, Limón Creole, or as citizens of Limón prefer to call it, Mecatelu, originated. It was recently recognized as an official language by the efforts of those who still try to defend and protect the Limón Creole. This is our main subject of study.
Limón Creole has existed in our country for more than 100 years, but let's understand better how this particular language originated. Limón Creole's lexifier, which is at its base, is the English language. It has a big contact with the Spanish due to what in linguistics is called a pidgin. A pidgin is a variety of language developed for practical purposes, especially trading among groups that had contact constantly but do not know each other's language. We must move back to many decades ago to understand the pidgin that Limón experimented. It started with the arrival of immigrants from the Antilles, the Caribbean, but especially from Jamaica to our country. In Costa Rica, in the second middle of the 19th century, coffee turned to the principal product for exportation. The crops were transported from the Pacific coast because the land of the Atlantic coast was inaccessible due to the jungles. To bring the coffee to Europe, they had to go around all of South America, and this made costs very high. To solve this situation, they wanted to build a railway and a port on the Atlantic coast, but the workforce was not enough. This event coincided with a job crisis in Jamaica, which provokes a big immigration to our country. With the difference of languages, a mixture between Jamaican, Spanish, and English, the pidgin took place. When the building of the railway ended in 1890, the banana industry started and kept growing until 1907. A large part of Jamaicans wanted to go back to their country, but in the end, the majority stayed here. At that time, most workers lived in plantations and had no contact with the rest of the country, but the long use of the pidgin made them keep using it. In 1913, the banana production decreased, and the United Fruit Company, which was the principal company where they worked, moved to the Pacific coast. As those black communities were considered part of the British Kingdom and they worried for the jobs they could take instead of Costa Ricans, the government implemented some regulations that banned the black population from working on the Pacific plantations. The cocoa replaced the banana at some point in the Pacific coast, and those populations developed in the area to survive. With the passage of the time, the pidgin went beyond its role as trade language and it became the first language of the social community. And when it happens, the pidgin starts to be called a Creole. The children were born in the area, and they grew up with Limón Creole as the first language. The development of a pidgin to a Creole is known as Creolization. However, we may have the contrary case. When speakers have contact with the languages that has greater social prestige, they normally start using fewer Creole forms and structures, and this process is known as decreolization.
Most of the people in a country who live in different areas have specific ways to speak. They have different dialects or they use words that vary from a province to another, for example. It might also be between the same province. The imaginary lines that we could make to separate that difference are called isoglosses. First of all, we need to emphasize what happened formerly. In the early years, some people emigrated outside and inside of the country. Besides, in the case of Limonese people, their ancestors were brought from Africa, Jamaica, even from San Andres Island, to work here. Well, in fact, they were enslaved. They spoke English, others spoke French, but they started to mix their roots, and this was the origin of some variations in the language like Limón Creole, which is known as Mecateliu, or the Patois. Actually, there is a big isogloss between Limón downtown and Cahuita. Cahuita, they almost always speak in Limón Creole. They use it to communicate between themselves.
Then after, when in conveyor mode, it's sleep for 6 months. That is the time she takes 2 years to feed it. I think plenty about it, adventure then into the jungle, and the same time that was me first time and get you to make me first brain. Me first brain was this way.
However, in Limón downtown, the language that people use most frequently is Spanish, according to what we experienced, of course. Even inside the same province, there is an isogloss because the language and words vary from one to another. For example, when we were in Cahuita, we could walk down the street and we could notice the use of Mecateliu between originary people from there. Nevertheless, when we were in Limon's park, almost everyone spoke Spanish. Another example of isoglosses is presented when the people use a different word for the same object in a different location. In the Caribbean campus of the UCR, one of the history professors explained that sometimes we can develop a word to name something by social interactions. For example, a typical dish from Limón is the friqué, fried cake, which is a fried bread made with flour to accompany different meals. A man who sold it in Limón used to say, "Hey Fresa, do you want a friqué?" And then people started calling that bread as fresa. We can identify it as friqué in Cahuita, but in Limón you can also identify it as fresa and friqué.
Bueno, ustedes que tal vez compren esta comida chatarra, yo no la compro, pero en Burger King y eso, eso, nuggets se llama. Nuggets de pollo, bueno, nuggets. Aquí tenemos mogambitos, porque el tipo le dice mogambo. Entonces ahora eso se llama mogambo. Entonces usted llega ahí a Barrio Roosevelt o Jamaica Town y usted dice, deme 1000 colones de mogambitos. Hey, give me a mogambito, boy.
Moving on, we notice a constant bilingualism in the province. Bilingualism is a term used to describe the capacity or ability of a person to communicate effectively in two different languages. For example, Canada is a bilingual country because they have English and French as an official language, and most of their people spoke these two languages. Now, in Costa Rica, we are not official a bilingual country. However, here in the Caribbean part of our country, some of the citizens are bilingual because they are able to speak Spanish and Limón Creole, which is an official language in our country. The ability to communicate in different languages improve our oral skills. Moreover, in our country sometimes can be considered a necessity in order to be related with tourism and foreigners. Limón is a bilingual province, but specifically Cavite, because in the streets you can learn the two languages, Spanish and Limón Creole, from children to elders.
El mecatelio yo lo aprendí de ahí y rociarme ahí en las escuelas y con los morenos y todo. Entonces, uno puede estudiar, a entender mecatelio no hay que ir a la escuela. La escuela del mecatelio es en la calle.
When we were in Cahuita, we were able to notice that Cahuita's people spoke in Mecatelio between each other and Spanish with foreigners, but they spoke these two languages with the same ability. Here we have an example of a person speaking in these two languages in Costa Rica. This speaker is a person who lives in Cahuita, Limón, and he is a native speaker of Spanish and also Standard English. However, this subject has a peculiarity because he speaks a variation of Limón Creole. According to him, does not have a name. And this is Mr. Ronald, and this man can speak the two languages since he was young.
Ronald, bueno, muchas gracias. Primero que todo.
Buen día.
Buen día. Una pregunta. ¿Usted habla el limón criollo?
No.
No.
La gente de antes sí lo hablaba. Nosotros no hablamos limón criollo.
¿Sus padres lo hablaban?
Sí.
¿Y usted nunca lo aprendió de ellos?
No, porque no quise.
No quiso.
Es un inglés diferente.
La razón por la que no quiso fue porque aquí no lo podía
Era muy
usar.
No, era muy pequeño, 9 años que tenía yo y uno cuando era pequeño muy fogoso. No le importaba nada, uno andaba jugando.
Y el que usaba siempre para jugar con sus amigos y demás era español.
El que yo hablo ¿no?
El inglés estándar.
Sí, sí, de Chile, 1200 years old, ¿no? ¿Me entendió? No, ¿verdad que no?
¿No?
Que yo llegué hasta aquí con ustedes. Eso quise decir en el inglés que yo hablo.
¿Y cuál sería?
No, es como criol también, pero es diferente.
Es un tipo.
El criol no lo hablamos aquí nosotros, solo los antiguos.
¿Y cómo le llaman ustedes al que hablan aquí? ¿O nunca le pusieron uno?
Sí, no.
As a sudden fact, Limón Creole may be disappearing since families are no longer teaching it to the next generations, since they prefer the standard English for their children.
Do you think that it is decreasing the use of Creole with the new generation?
Yes, absolutely.
And do you feel sad about it?
No,
Not really.
no.
It doesn't mind for you.
For me, no. But I think that maybe the oldest people, yes. Because it's part of our culture.
Families taught their children the language because they wanted to keep their roots, but since in Costa Rica the primary language is Spanish and in schools they teach English as a subject, this may have created that many parents decide not to teach the new generations what their ancestors taught them because they think that it's not essential to learn Creole as long as they know how to speak Spanish and English to communicate with Costa Ricans and foreigners.
Do you have children?
Yes, I have 2 daughters, but they do not speak it.
But
That's what my
did
father.
you try to teach them?
Yes,
or not?
I teach them, but I teach them the standard English. That's what I did wrong. So when they listen to me speak the Creole, like, mommy, like, what are you talking? Because they don't understand me, you know? They understand certain words, but not like fluently. If I'm speaking with, sometimes I meet friends, and when they listen to me speaking, like, mommy, you sound different speaking, like, because I sound like another person speaking, you know? So they speak, but majority they speak the standard.
But do you regret about not
Yeah.
to
Yes, because they don't understand it well. That's what's my fault, because I've been studying standard English and I focus with them with that. They're in private schools, focusing on standard English. So I think I don't confuse them, but I did wrong. I shouldn't.
Where did you learn Limón Creole?
I learned at home.
At home?
At home with my mom.
So you didn't receive any classes?
And no, that's native at home with my mother, my father, my brother's grandmother.
And do you still have some friends who speak?
Yes, of
Creole?
course. When we meet with friends from the high school, then we speak the Creole English. We speak the old time. That's the moment when we speak. We go back to our heritage and we speak the Creole English.
Okay. And do you prefer to use Limón Creole when you are within this context of family or friends?
Sometimes, because it's nice to rescue a little bit of the culture. You know, you feel like you're back to the roots.
As a consequence, for many years it wasn't considered a language and was commonly known as a way of interaction owned by Limonese people to communicate between family members, friends, and even at work. Throughout this investigation, we learned that Limón is not only characterized for its authentic culture and gastronomy, but also for the enriched linguistic aspects that we found in their language. As mentioned before, many people don't know that this language had its origin from the influence of different languages that don't resemble each other, and due to this, there are different variations around Cahuita. This topic is controversial because if you don't know anything of the language spoken, it can be offensive to ask about it. As a recommendation, it is better to do good research before talking about this, considering that it can be disrespectful for them to call it Mecateliu, Patois, or Limonese Creole. Some of them told us that it doesn't have a name, it is just something that they speak. Something that really caught our eye was how the pidgin works in Limón, because even though citizens speak different variations, in a conversation they can still understand each other. In addition, bilingualism is an important factor that allows them to socialize easily with foreigners whose first language is Spanish or English. Besides, the beauty of Cahuita is one of the reasons why tourists decide to visit and also live in the neighborhood. Thanks to this, it is simple for them to speak more than 2 languages. For example, we saw people who can speak Spanish, English, and languages like French and German. Also adapt their accents as in British or American English. As a result, there are some words that were created by citizens because of their frequent use. Those words are unique because they have a meaning that only they know, and they become words that people use in their daily conversations on the streets. Nowadays, thanks to the initiative of people from Limón in 2018, it was officially declared a language according to the Article 9619, certified by the Legislative Assembly, in which it requires public and private institutions to promote activities to recognize and inform about the importance of Creole. It remains the commemoration on the 30th of August as the day of celebration of the Limonese Creole language. Subsequently, there is a book called Make We Write with Language, Limón Creole Alphabet, that explains the alphabet and the grammatical morphology of Mecateliu to motivate Creole speakers to write in their language. Years later, the first translation from English to Creole was The Little Prince. We infer that Creole should be preserved and be taught in schools because besides being a language, it is the cultural identity of Limonese citizens that we believe contains memories and historical value from their ancestors that influenced the growth of Limón. They built everything as we can see now. Cahuita is a lovely place, surrounded by nature, landscapes, music, costumes, and kind people that give tourists a warm welcome and make us want to go again. It is important for new generations to remember where we come from and be proud of it.
You're welcome to come to Cahuita.
Oh, thank you very much.
Glad to see you in Cahuita because Cahuita is a nice place and you can come back again, come enjoy yourself and dance and eat and do everything what you want.
Thank you.